Alcatraz Island, San Francisco Bay, June 12, 1962. At 7:15 in the morning, a guard approaches cell B-138 for the routine bed check. A man lies under a blanket, face turned towards the wall. The guard calls out. No response. He calls again. Nothing. He reaches through the bars and shakes the figure by the shoulder. The head rolls off the pillow and hits the concrete floor. It's made of soap, painted with flesh-tone paint, topped with real human hair. 2 more cells are the same. 3 inmates have vanished from the most secure prison in America. They've been gone for nearly 12 hours, and no one noticed. This is the story of how they disappeared. Alcatraz Island sits in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Less than 19 acres of rock surrounded by 2 kilometers of open water in every direction. In 1934, the United States Department of Justice turned it into a federal penitentiary. It had one purpose: to hold the men that every other prison in the country had failed to keep. They called it the Rock. The water around Alcatraz was freezing, 50 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to shut down a man's muscles in under 20 minutes. The currents were fast, unpredictable, and pulled toward the open Pacific. On most nights, fog rolled in thick enough to blind a man at arm's length. The island was visible from the city, close enough to see the lights of San Francisco, close enough to hear the sounds of traffic and music drifting across the water. But the 2 kilometers between the island and the shore might as well have been an ocean, and the prison knew it. The showers were always supplied with hot water, not as a comfort. The warm water kept inmates from getting used to the cold. Even the plumbing was a security measure. The bars were tool-resistant steel. The guard towers were positioned to cover every angle of the island. Inmates were counted multiple times per night. Every light, every shadow, every sound was monitored. The cells measured 5 feet by 9 feet. A sink, a toilet, a cot, concrete walls. Every moment of every day was accounted for. Wake up, count, eat, count, work, count, sleep. There was nothing to do and nowhere to go. That was the point. Al Capone served time there. So did gangsters, bank robbers, and men who had escaped every other facility in the federal system. Before June of 1962, there had been 14 escape attempts involving 36 inmates. Every single one was either captured, shot, or presumed drowned. No one had ever made it off the island and stayed free. Then, Frank Lee Morris arrived. Morris was orphaned by the age of 11. He bounced between foster homes, never staying long. He was convicted of his first crime at 13. By his late teens, his records included narcotics, armed robbery, and bank robbery. He spent his formative years cycling through facilities of increasing security. He escaped from the Louisiana State Penitentiary while serving a 10-year sentence. He was caught, he was tried again, and eventually federal officials decided there was only one place left to send him. When Morris arrived at Alcatraz, prison officials noted something unusual on his intake file. Under psychological and aptitude tests, they recorded an IQ of 133, top 2% of the general population. The associate warden's record card listed his occupation in a single phrase: escape artist. The federal system had a term for inmates like Morris. They called his pattern shotgun freedom, a man who fires in every direction, hoping one shot lands. He had escaped, been caught, escaped again, been caught again. He'd been doing it since he was a teenager, and now the government believed they had found the one place where the pattern would end. The man they sent to an inescapable prison was a professional at escaping prisons. But Morris did not work alone. The Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, arrived shortly after. 2 of 13 children born to seasonal farm workers in Donaldsville, Georgia. Their parents moved the family to Ruskin, Florida in the early 1940s, chasing work in the truck farms and tomato fields. Every June, they traveled north to Michigan to pick cherries. The brothers grew up poor. By the early 20s, both were robbing banks. In 1958, John, Clarence, and their brother Alfred held up a bank in Columbia, Alabama. They walked out with $18,000. They were caught 5 days later. Both ended up at the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, where they first met Frank Morris. The brothers tried to escape Atlanta multiple times. Clarence once attempted to smuggle himself out in 2 enormous bread boxes. These attempts earned them transfers to Alcatraz, the same place Morris was, the same cell block, the same corridor. That was not a coincidence. But it was a mistake. The fourth man was Alan West. He was serving his second term on the Rock, a car thief who knew the building better than most guards. One day, while cleaning a utility corridor behind the cell block, West noticed something. The concrete around the ventilation grills was deteriorating. Decades of salt air had eaten into it. The 6 by 9 inch vent openings at the rear of each cell could be widened with enough patience, wide enough for a man to squeeze through. He told Morris, and Morris saw the rest of the path. Not just through the wall, through the corridor, up the pipes, across the roof, and off the island.
Most inmates looked at Alcatraz and saw a cage. Morris saw a blueprint. So how do they do it?
The plan began to take shape in December of 1961. The inmates fashioned chisels from metal spoons stolen from a cafeteria. They discovered that the weakened concrete could be chipped apart with these crude tools. Night after night, from 5:30 each evening until just before the lights out count. The Anglin brothers occupied adjacent cells. Morris and West were side by side. While one man dug, the other watched the guards. Morris played his concertina in the evenings. The music masked the sound of scraping concrete. For months, the guards heard nothing but an inmate playing a musical instrument in his cell.
They did not know that behind the music, the wall was disappearing.
But holes in a wall were only the beginning. They still needed to cross 2 kilometers of freezing open water. So they built a raft. Over the next several months, they stitched together more than 50 stolen raincoats into a 6 by 14 foot inflatable vessel. Some were donated by other inmates who knew about the plan. Some were stolen. Many prisoners across the cell block knew what these men were doing. None of them said a word. They used glue stolen from the prison's glove shop to seal the seams. They carved wooden paddles. They fashioned life preservers from the same material. John Anglin carefully completed the valve assembly. Morris modified his concertina into a bellows that could rapidly inflate the raft once they reached the shore. The entire vessel was built in a space no larger than a bathroom, hidden 30 feet above a prison full of guards. Meanwhile, John and Clarence built the dummy heads, cement powder, soap, and toilet paper, flesh-tone paint from prison art kits, real human hair from the barbershop floor. The brothers gave them pet names, Oink and Oscar. Up close, they looked crude, but in the dim of a cell block at night, from a guard's distance, they looked like men sleeping. Every evening after work, the inmates hauled everything up through the utility corridor and hid it on top of the cell block. This became their secret workshop, a space the guards never checked. For 6 months, an entire escape operation was being assembled 30 feet above the heads of the men paid to prevent it. The tools were as improvised as the raft. Wes stole an electric hair clipper from the barbershop. He stole a motor from the prison's vacuum cleaner by volunteering to repair it. He opened the machine, found 2 motors, removed one, and got the other working. No one noticed, but the motor was too noisy and only partially effective. Most of the work was done by hand. Spoons and chisels, one scrape at a time. By May of 1962, they had dug completely through the vent holes. They covered the openings with fake grills made from paper mache, painted to match the concrete. From a safe distance, the wall looked untouched. The guards walked past these holes every day. They never saw them. What most accounts leave out is that the plan originally involved more than 4 men. At least 2 other inmates on the 3rd tier had been part of the scheme early on. One of them, June Stevens, occupied a cell directly above Morris and the Anglin brothers. He had been digging through his own ventilation grill since December. Another inmate, Robert Williams, worked alongside Morris in the glove shop. He helped secure materials. He was a close friend. He was serving a life sentence for murder, but Morris cut them both loose. The upper tier cells were too exposed. New warm water spouts were being installed, and the work behind the walls would be impossible to conceal during inspections. Loose cement at the height could fall and alert officers, and the climb out of a confined space 3 stories up, holding only pipes, was too dangerous. Morris was methodical. He calculated risk the way other people calculate budgets, every variable accounted for. Stevens agreed to withdraw. Williams denied any involvement after the fact. But when investigators searched the cell block after the escape, they found holes around the ventilation grill in both men's cells. Stevens was tried and convicted for his role. Williams was never charged. Neither of them ever made it off the island. On the night of June 11, 1962, Morris checked the rooftop ventilator grill. It was loose enough. He looked at the others. 6 months worth of work. 50 stolen raincoats. 2 dummy heads named after pigs. A raft that had never touched water. A bellows made from a musical instrument. And a route that required climbing 30 feet up a pipe, crossing a rooftop in the dark, and descending 50 feet down the side of a building while guards watched from the lighthouse.
Everything they had built was either going to work tonight or it was going to get them killed.
It was time. At 9:30 p.m., immediately after lights out, Morris brings down the dummy heads from the top of the cell block. He tells the others, tonight, they place the painted heads on their pillows. They arrange the blankets. They pull the covers up to the chins of the fake faces. From the corridor in the dark, 4 beds look occupied. 4 inmates appear to be sleeping. One by one, they squeeze through the holes in their cell walls into the utility corridor behind. The space is narrow, barely wide enough for a man's shoulders. Pipes run along the walls. The air smells like rust and salt water. But Alan West cannot get through. His grill is stuck. The concrete won't break. Clarence Anglin goes back into the corridor and tries to kick it free from the outside. Morris sends one of the Anglins to help West again. They never return. 3 men are going. The 4th is not. They leave West behind. 3 men begin to climb, 30 feet straight up the plumbing pipes, gripping wet metal in the dark. One slip and the sound would echo through the entire cell block. They do not slip. They reach the top of the 3rd tier. They cross the narrow space beneath the cell house roof where their tools and materials have been stored for 6 months. Oink and Oscar had been built there. The raft had been sealed here, and now they're leaving it behind. Morris approaches the rooftop ventilator. He has been loosening it for weeks. He pushes. It gives. Cold air pours in. The night sky opens above them. They pull themselves through. 100 feet across the rooftop. Past the lighthouse where guards are watching the water, not the roof. Down 50 feet of exterior piping to the ground. Through the barbed wire. Down the steep embankment to the northeast shore. The bay is in front of them. The mainland is a dark line in the fog. Angel Island sits roughly a mile to the north. The water is black. They inflate the raft using the concertina bellows. The raincoat material holds. The valves seal. They push it into the water. 50 degrees. Thick fog. Current pulls north. They paddle and they disappear. According to West's later testimony, the plan was to reach Angel Island first, rest there, then cross Raccoon Straits to the Martin County shore, steal a car, burglarize a clothing store for civilian clothes, split up and go as far from the Bay Area as possible. This is the last anyone ever sees of Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin. Back on Alcatraz, West eventually breaks through his grill. It takes him another hour. He climbs to the rooftop. He pulls himself through the ventilator opening and stands on the roof of the cell house for the first time. The fog is thick. The bay is silent. He looks out over the water. Everyone is gone. The raft is gone. The fog has swallowed everything. He stands there for a moment. The man who noticed the weakened concrete. The man who found the saw blades. The man who stole the vacuum motor. The man who built the life preservers. He is standing on the roof of Alcatraz, alone, with no way off the island. He climbs back down, returns to his cell, and goes to bed. The next morning, at 7:15 a.m., the guard reaches cell B-138. 3 painted heads, 3 empty cells, 12 hours gone. Alcatraz goes into lockdown. The FBI is called. A massive search begins. For 10 days, military and law enforcement agencies comb the bay by air, sea, and land. Helicopters fly grid patterns over the water. Coast Guard boats cut through the fog. Divers search the shoreline. They find personal items floating in the water. Pieces of the raft. A life preserver with heavy teeth marks on the bow. The homemade clip had failed. Whoever wore it would have struggled to stay afloat. The search expands to the mainland. Police check bus stations, train stations, and highways across North California. They find nothing. No trace of 3 men in prison clothing. No bodies. No survivors. Just debris in the water and silence everywhere else. 5 days after the escape, a postcard arrives at the FBI's San Francisco office. The message reads, "Ha ha, we made it." The FBI was not amused. They could not determine who sent it. 5 weeks later, a Norwegian freighter reports seeing a body floating 20 miles northwest of the Golden Gate Bridge, face down, hands dangling. Full-length denim trousers that matched prison-issue uniforms. The crew didn't report the sighting until October. The FBI called it one of the most significant leads in the case. No other missing persons at the time had been wearing similar trousers. But here's the thing. On the same night as the escape, a man named Seymour Webb jumped from the Golden Gate Bridge in front of numerous eyewitnesses. The Coast Guard responded quickly. His body was never recovered either. People die in these waters all the time.
The Bay does not give them back.
In 1979, after 17 years, the FBI closed the case. Morris and the Anglin brothers had drowned. That was the official conclusion. No stolen cars reported in Marin County. No burglarized clothing stores. No contact with family. The water was too cold. The currents were too strong. Case closed. But then there is the other evidence. The evidence that doesn't fit. A raft was found on Angel Island. Footprints led away from it. The next day, a blue 1955 Chevrolet was stolen from Marin County. 3 men were spotted in the car in Stockton. The FBI found Spanish-language textbooks in the escapees' cells. Someone had been planning for life south of the border. And then the sightings began. In 1975, a childhood friend claimed he met John and Clarence at a bar in Brazil. He produced a photograph. 2 men in sunglasses. A facial recognition analyst hired by the Anglin family said it was them. The FBI disagreed. In 1989, at the funeral of the Anglin brothers' father, 2 unusually large people dressed in women's clothing arrived. They stood at the back. They spoke to no one. When the service ended, they left without a word. The family watched them go. No one approached them. No one asked who they were. To this day, no one knows. The 3rd Anglin brother, Alfred, never made it out of prison. He was electrocuted while attempting to escape from Kilby Prison in Montgomery, Alabama in 1964, 2 years after his brothers vanished from Alcatraz. Escaping ran in the family. Alfred did not survive his attempt. Then came the letter. In 2013, a handwritten note arrived at a San Francisco police station. It read, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." The letter offered a deal: medical treatment in exchange for 1 year in prison. The FBI tested it for fingerprints, DNA, and handwriting. The results were inconclusive. The letter claimed Clarence had died in 2011, Morris in 2008, and John was dying too. That letter is either the confession of an 83-year-old fugitive or a hoax. The FBI cannot determine which. And that uncertainty is the entire story of this case, compressed into a single piece of paper. In 2014, a team of Dutch scientists at Delft University built a computer model of the bay's tides on the night of June 11, 1962. They ran simulations, hundreds of them. Their conclusion? If the raft launched between 11:30 p.m. and midnight, survival was plausible. The tide would have carried them north toward Angel Island and the Marin shore.
If they launched too early, the current would have swept them out to the Pacific.
Too late, and they would have been pushed back toward the city. But in that 30-minute window, the bay was on their side. Allen West's testimony placed the launch time squarely inside that window. The science says it was possible. The evidence says someone reached the shore. The letter says all 3 survived. The FBI says they did not. Alcatraz closed in 1963, 1 year after the escape. It is now a national park. Over 1 million visitors walk through it every year. They peer into cell B-138. They look at the hole in the wall. They see the dummy heads behind glass. They stand where Morris stood. They look at the bay and they wonder. The question was never really whether they survived to old age. The question is whether they survived the night. Whether 3 men with stolen spoons, a raft made of raincoats, and a bellows built from a musical instrument crossed 2 kilometers of freezing water and touched the shore on the other side. The FBI spent 17 years looking for the answer. They interviewed hundreds of people. They tracked leads across the country and across the world. They examined every scrap of debris that washed ashore. They never found a body. They never found a survivor. They found nothing that settled the question in either direction.
And that is the strangest part.
After 60 years, the answer is still the same as it was on the morning of June 12, 1962. Nobody knows. The case file remains open. The warrants remain active. And cell B-138 on Alcatraz Island remains exactly as it was on the morning the guard reached through the bars and the head made of soap rolled off the pillow and hit the floor.